Hello, everyone. I'm Ken Hildebrandt, the Executive Artistic Director of Gallery 7 Theatre and Performing Arts Society. Hope you're all staying healthy and safe during this incredibly strange time for us. Of course, our thoughts are with everyone that's hunkered down at home. We're thinking about our health professionals. We're thinking of our leaders who are making decisions for us, and we're just hoping and praying that you're all doing all right. Here at the theater, of course, we're in sort of a state of suspension right now. We're looking at we've had to postpone a couple of shows, but we're still making plans to be back to raise the curtain and turn the lights back on as soon as we're allowed to do so. So we're hoping that you'll join us again for another great season starting hopefully this fall. In the meantime, we wanted to take some time just to talk to you about some of the projects, or at least one of the projects that Gallery 7 has been partnering with a local playwright on. One of the things that's really important to us as a theater company is to encourage works of local playwrights and to help walk alongside, foster those things, and hopefully see those plays up on our stage at some point. We've been doing that for the last couple of years with Abbey Theatre Fest, and now we've been working on a project for actually a main stage production. And I'm just going to welcome to this little interview here, Mr. Adriel Brandt, who is also self-isolating in his own house. We're all doing this, using Zoom and all that kind of fun stuff. Thanks, Gabe Kirkley, by the way, for helping us set this up and for the great idea. Welcome, Adriel. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing all right. All right. How are you?
I'm doing all right, all things considered, too. Tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on, because you and I have talked about this. When did we first approach this? Probably almost a year ago?
I emailed you in November 2018. And
Boy,
so we've been in contact since then, yeah.
Yeah.
The project is to adapt Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities.
Cool.
For the stage, yeah. I mean, that's pretty succinctly put there. What sort of details do you want?
Well, let's talk about it. First of all, why Tale of Two Cities? I know you're a Dickens fan. I'm a Dickens fan. But beyond that, why Tale of Two Cities?
Well, there's the honest answer, and then there's the marketable answer. The honest answer was I approached you asking if you were interested in an original script for your stage. And you said, sure, this author or that author and this piece or that piece. And one of the authors was the inimitable Jane Austen, but I had just come off the stage having played Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, so I thought, okay, maybe not Austen yet. And so I looked at Dickens, and then A Tale of Two Cities was something like 200 pages shorter than Great Expectations. So that's why I chose that. But then the marketable answer is that there's a lot to offer. There's a lot to dig into and read in A Tale of Two Cities.
I know that you and I had to talk a little bit about an adaptation of a story that would fit well within Gallery 7's mandate, and I think we both agreed that Tale of Two Cities has a whole bunch of themes that would be really interesting to explore, both for you personally, but also for us as a theater company.
Absolutely, it's a very rich story.
So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges of taking a Dickens novel that, if my English lit studies come back to me, it was written as a serial. It appeared in newspapers in sequential form, and it usually ended off each entry with a cliffhanger and that sort of thing. And it became quite the sprawling story. Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges of trying to get that all into a show, because I know that I've been always hammering away saying it's got to be 2 hours or so. And that's going to be pretty tough given the length and the size and the breadth of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the greatest difficulties is just that Dickens loves narrative. He loves words and grammar, and many people are turned off of his work simply because they don't know how to follow a sentence from beginning to end, because there are maybe half a dozen to a dozen commas. There are 2 or 3 colons, and also a few dashes and semicolons thrown in into that one sentence as well. I know I came across a few sentences that, in fact, comprised whole paragraphs. And so something difficult to adapt this for the stage is that, of course, a screenplay or a play script is almost strictly dialogue. And so when so much that is important from a narrative is in the narration, is in the prose, then it can be difficult to pull the story from those extraordinarily long sentences, and where dialogue is described but not actually said, and to interpret that into script friendly dialogue was definitely a challenge.
Always remember, if I can just interrupt for just a second, I just love Carrie Fisher's quote about Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie. She would always say, "Well, you can write this stuff, but you can't necessarily say this stuff."
Right.
Have you kind of felt the same way with the dialogue?
In a sort of way. Sorry, I've been slightly derailed. But as far as the dialogue that is present in A Tale of Two Cities, something to be said about Dickens, and even if I'll compare him, I'm currently reading Emma by Jane Austen, and something that I can compare the two and say that both are relatively accessible classic lit, but one of the reasons why Dickens, I think, has survived so long is that it's not only engaging, comical, and profound storytelling, but it's also stories about the lower classes, to be blunt. Whereas Austen is about wealthy people. It's very pastoral and lovely and hilarious as well. But Dickens is about poor people. It's about child thieves and daughters living with their fathers because they're too poor. Although that's of course a main plot of Emma as well. But so to speak on that dialogue, a lot of the dialogue is very human and very readable and very speakable for Carrie Fisher. It's not there is this the hill of punctuation and long sentences and long-windedness, but there's also definitely a very grounded, very earthy human nature to his dialogue and writing as well.
Right. So we've been talking about the breadth and scope of the novel itself and trying to get it sort of edited down into a script that works in a approximately 2-hour stage adaptation. I know you've done a number of drafts of the play already. How long was your first draft, just out of curiosity?
The first draft was I think it was something around 300 pages. And so at a minute per page, it was a little bit longer than the hoped for 2 hours.
And I know that you've been working really hard on sort of focusing the story to the place to the key points that really resonate with you. And so you've gone through how many drafts now?
I'm currently working on the 6th.
Working on the 6th, and so whereabouts are you now in terms of the length of the story?
As far as I'm concerned, it's at a good length. It's at a good playable length. Again, I was inspired to start this project because of the adaptation of Pride and Prejudice that I participated in. And that play was just short of 3 hours, and this one is just short of that play. So yeah. I feel like it's a decent length, and I feel like there's more in A Tale of Two Cities than there is in Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, and that's the tough part. I mean, there's a number of different adaptations of the story as well, and you kind of have to pick and choose what's going to, be what your take on the story is, and. So yeah, I can imagine that that's really tough, especially if you love the story. You just want to include every little thing that you like. Mm-hmm. But of course, how do you make that work in a 2 to 3 hour stage adaptation, right? Yeah, interesting. Is there any kind of themes in particular that really resonate with you that you're hoping to really highlight in your particular adaptation of the story?
Well, I think, I mean, that's a difficult thing. I don't think of myself as a prescriptive creator. And so I am presenting a piece that I hope will resonate with people for reasons of their own, largely. But there are, of course, subtle and unsubtle themes that you cannot help but notice when you read the novel and when you really dig into the novel. And some of those themes are just like perseverance and faith and love is a big one as well. Love motivates a lot of the significant choices made in the Tale of Two Cities. Um, I know you also had some themes that you had picked up from the novel and from the scripts as well. So if you want to feed into this as well.
No, it's it's a tricky thing from our perspective, like from my perspective, because I really don't want to get in the way of the playwright, you know, writing the play that they really want and what they feel really passionate about, and then trying to steer that in a way to say, you know, yeah, I think I can direct this, or yeah, I think I can make that scene work, and I think I can make these scenes kind of thread together staging wise. And it's an interesting process because as a playwright, you're coming from a storytelling and dialogue perspective, and you kind of say, well, that's the director's job. And from a director's perspective, which I'm hoping to direct this adaptation and to continue to walk alongside and help us move forward. It's like, hey, Adriel, can you help us out with this particular scene, because that's going to be really tough to make it work on stage. So I imagine there's a lot of that. There has been a lot of give and take, you know, as we walk alongside and develop it. But yeah, it's making sure that me as a director doesn't get in the way of the story that the playwright really wants to tell, kind of thing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it continues to morph. Now, have you actually had some readings of this story already? Have you gotten people together to actually listen to it?
Yeah, well, it started with myself. I went through and I read it out loud. I didn't do too many voices, but a few. At that point, it was still a 3 or 4 hour ordeal, and so I would do voices up until 2 hours, and then I ran out of voice and read it silently to myself. And then from there, various connections of mine from the theater world had been getting together to read scripts, and so I foisted myself upon them with my script and usurped their usual event to kind of workshop it, get outside feedback on what worked and how the story flowed and that sort of thing. And so I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and we had a talking stick that we'd pass around, and whoever had the device would then read the first character that came up in the scene, and then to the left would read the next characters as they came up. And so it was very diverse, but rich experience. I think it helped a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually sounds really fun. I know that we're hoping to do another reading with your most latest latest draft, if you will, and then we're hoping that within the next couple of years we'll actually be able to do the stage version of the show. So we may have covered this a little bit, but I just maybe just to recap, has there been anything that you've discovered during this whole process? I know playwrights, I would imagine you go in with good intentions, and then you get into the process, and then you make all kinds of discoveries and that sort of thing. Have you noticed anything in particular with the process?
Well, something that I wanted to do as soon as I actually sat down and started an adaptation of a novel was to keep as close to the novel as I could. I know lots of people, or anyone almost, who has enjoyed a piece of literature and has then anticipated and watched an adaptation of that. I know it started with me with The Lord of the Rings. This year, there's a long-awaited Artemis Fowl adaptation coming to the cinemas, and of course there's so much in between. But when I watch these adaptations, or when I watch the trailers, or even a publicity photo, then I think, why didn't they do this? Why didn't
Right.
they give
Yeah.
Harry green eyes when the book said he had green eyes?
Yeah.
So on and so forth. And so on one hand, I think I've done it, excuse me, I think I've done it pretty well. My first draft was literally every word spoken in A Tale of Two Cities was on the page with any other necessary text to tell the story. But on the other hand, I know now why scenes are combined or scenes are left out. And so I have gained a greater appreciation for the process of trimming. I won't call it the fat, although I could call it the fat because fat is a necessary thing for a diet and a life. Yeah, for trimming a story down, to boiling it down to what a particular adaptation needs it to be. Like that comes back to your theme ideas.
Right.
Is this comical side character necessary to have every one of his scenes, or can you cut some of his scenes so that you can have every one of these more important to the story scenes? But at the end of the day, it is an adaptation. There will be bits that you loved in the novel that were cut out, but I think I've done a pretty good job in capturing the feel. Most of the words are mine. You can do a little bit of a search in the script if you like, to see if you can find where my words are in there instead of Dickens. But I think yeah, I've gained a greater appreciation for the process of cutting something down into a different medium.
So just out of curiosity, just a couple more questions, and then we'll call it a wrap. But I'm just wondering if you, after spending so much time in Dickens language, do you find yourself starting to write or talk like that, like Dickens?
Yeah, that's something that I used to do a little bit more when I was younger. I would read a novel and then I'd start writing. Like this was back when you had the Facebook statuses that started with Adriel is. And then I can find where I was reading a certain novel depending on like the punctuation and verbosity of my Facebook statuses. But to a degree, I think that still stands today. Cool. But to a lesser degree.
I know, I'm kind of smiling because I've kind of noticed it when we correspond sometimes. It's like, oh, he's starting to sound a little bit like Dickens. It's pretty funny.
That is just kind of how I speak, though.
Yeah, no, I know. I think it's awesome. Okay, just a couple more questions. One is, once we get this thing to the stage, what are you hoping that audiences will be most excited about?
I'm hoping that they will be excited about live theater and local script writing, but even more than that, like just a good story. Honestly, it's about story for me. I think that theater and film and novels and art in general, art for art's sake, as it were. But as well, like I know Gallery 7, I think this is more your thing, to hope that they feel enriched or something like that. I feel like just going and sitting for 2 hours and enjoying a story and getting engaged with the characters is enrichment enough for
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah.
But there is definitely more to this story than I suppose. Well, I can't say pure art or art without meaning, because all art can have meaning. Again, it's not prescriptive. But yeah, I hope that they'll enjoy the story, and hopefully the production will be worth watching as well.
Oh, of course.
I can only speak from the script for the script at the moment, but
of course it's going to be most amazing for audiences.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Of course it's.
But then yeah, there are strong characters as well that might inspire, and the story itself is very poignant. And so if they are moved or inspired, I think that's something that we can hope for as well.
Absolutely. Last question that I have for you: what made you decide that you wanted to try your hand at playwriting in the first place?
Well, in the first place, it was simply a creative spirit, if you will, back in high school when I got inspired by theater. By the time I was inspired by theater, I was already writing first chapters of dozens of novels on my old Windows 99 computer. As far as this project goes, what inspired me was, again, it kind of goes back to that Pride and Prejudice adaptation. I noticed that it had been commissioned by some Calgary theater company. And I thought, oh, like I can do that.
Yeah, cool.
I mean, the proof will be in the pudding when the pudding is served.
Well, if the script that I've been reading is any indication, I think we're going to be in good shape once we actually get to stage it. A little bit of work to be done. We're going to try and get I think we mentioned this already. We're going to try and get another reading done, and I think that will probably be sort of one of the last steps before we actually turn that adaptation into the working staging script that Gallery 7 will use for the production. And I just want to say thanks for being patient with us, Adriel. I know that we've wanted to walk alongside you with this and to give you the opportunity to get your work up on stage. And it's always a matter of navigating all the different schedules and finding the right time slot and all that kind of stuff. And so I know you've been waiting a long time. And so we really appreciate your patience with that. And plays don't always necessarily just, get written one day and then the next day they're up on stage, at least. So I appreciate the patience and for you continuing to work with us on this. I'm super stoked to be able to stage this at some point in the very near future. So thanks very much for your time to talk to us here as well. Wishing you well as you finish off that 6th draft. I know you've been working really hard on this, and I think that work's going to pay off. So keep at it. So thanks again, Adriel Brandt, playwright based right here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, and he's working on the stage adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and we're hoping within the next few years that we'll be able to stage it at Gallery 7 Theatre. In the meantime, once again, we just wish all of you safety and health. And when that sunshine comes through the clouds, I hope you are able to take a few minutes just to enjoy it. But for now, we'll say goodbye. But we look forward to talking to you again soon.